Would I put my own kids into military service? No, because I wouldn't trust the training well enough. Once the first shot goes off, stuff starts moving. Your training is not really relevant to that. Your training is usually on a piece of gray cardboard placed in the end of the shooting range. So BlinkTroll Robotics is about training and realistic training.
Today, BlinkTroll system is being used by over 10,000 soldiers and police across Europe.
Space is humanity's greatest laboratory. Defense is democracy's strongest shield. And today, in workshops, in laboratories, in startups, a new generation rises, not to observe history, but to write it, where every innovation above drives progress below, where every breakthrough in defense preserves our freedom to create. Behind every breakthrough stands a founder with a story. Now these stories emerge to light the path for those who follow. Welcome to Rockets and Radars.
Officially, hey Kenneth, before we dive in, grab your favorite drink and get comfortable. You went from a Norwegian soldier's garage hobby project to building a defense tech company that's literally helping NATO forces prepare for real combat. And you have convinced investors to put 1.5 million euros in pre-seed round into your vision of moving targets that increase soldiers' hit accuracy from 10 to 80%. You spent over a decade in Norwegian Special Forces, including deployment in Afghanistan, and then built a team that turned this military innovation into a scalable company. And you have just secured backing from us, Fund the Frontier, I will get into that, to expand across NATO allies. I want to really get into not just the company journey, but as well as the personal journey, from garage tinkering to saving lives on the front lines. Anyway, listeners are probably wondering why we got you and BlinkTroll on this show, as you are still in a very early stage, apart from the other companies that we got in. But honestly, there is a pretty cool reason for that. And maybe I added a hint before a few seconds ago, but I'm actually very excited to share that BlinkTroll is the very first publicly announced investment for Fund the Frontier, which is the new Nordic space and defense VC firm I'm with. So by the time you are hearing this, the news should already be out there. But yeah, we are pretty excited about it. Okay, let's get into the story from the very beginning. Before we get into the timeline, I would love to get into what actually BlinkTroll Robotics is. So Kenneth, if you could in one sentence explain what does your company do, that would be awesome for people that might not know you yet.
Well, thank you, Martin. Thanks for having me. BlinkTroll Robotics is about training and realistic training. So as a soldier, you put on your boots, you pull up your rifle, and then you should be ready. But you're worthless if you don't have proper training. So we're all about training, really.
Very simple and very understandable. Awesome. And now I would love to get into who are you as a person when you're not building robots for NATO forces.
I'm like quiet fire. I go deep into things. I like freediving because it's a challenge. I like running because it hurts. I like motorbikes because they're beautiful and they go fast and they make nice sound. You know, I'm passionate about things. I love fixing things and repairing things and building things. I'm a father of two beautiful children. Yeah, that's like a short condensed version of me.
I would call you the thinker and the builder. Love it. Okay, great. You spent more than 10 years in Norwegian Special Forces, including deployment in Afghanistan. What does that kind of experience teach you about the gap between the training and reality that led you to start a company in the first place?
When I started in the Special Forces, it was actually after a long period of time in the submarine forces. And I was getting a little adventurous and I wanted to move into something else. And Special Forces, you train a lot with your weaponry, you do a lot of shooting. And then at some point, I realized that I could predict what was going to happen. And at that point, I thought there's got to be some way to fix that. And the idea of moving targets basically showed up. But it was difficult because in Norway, it's like rocks and trees everywhere. And it's like trees. I can utilize that. So that was kind of the idea. And, you know, I don't have a lot of combat experience or anything like that, as many other Danes would have, much more. But I mean, a lot of soldiers would recognize the fact that once the first shot goes off, stuff starts moving. And then your training is kind of like, not really relevant to that. And we move and they move and everybody moves. And your training is usually on a piece of gray cardboard placed in the end of the shooting range. So that was kind of the starting point of the idea, really.
Before even thinking about this idea, you were successful in oil and gas industry, designing hunting products. What made you shift from this industry or those industries into defense tech in the end?
Well, I guess I kind of liked working in the oil and gas industry as well. To begin with, it was kind of exciting. We were doing downhole robotics, and it was kind of challenging. But when we were not working, there was long periods of waiting time. On a drilling rig, you might sit for 14 days and do nothing because of the weather or because of some other operation, and it was literally just killing me. I am not put together in a way that kind of makes me happy. Then I have to do something. So I started going into basically YouTube and software and learning how to do CAD and designing things, because that was kind of something that I found interesting. And after some period of time, that was just more appealing to me, creating things, than sitting and waiting for a call to go and do something. So I guess I wanted to kind of steer it myself as opposed to being told what to do.
You were already, we can call successful. Why risk it all on starting something new on your own?
Well, I live inside my head, and the head and the heart has to be satisfied, and I wasn't satisfied, to put it honestly. To be honest, I just didn't like it, and I was making good money, and I thought when I started in the oil industry that this is top notch. I make good money. I got a lot of time off. I get rotations and it's cool. But at the end of the day, it was like not satisfying to me. And I suppose if I didn't do that, I could have been a carpenter. I could have been a shipwright, or I could have been a welder, or somebody creating things. But creating things is like pretty fundamental to me. So when I had the opportunity to go that way, that is more important than safety or anything else for me, really.
If there are any similar people listening to this and they know that they want to do something else as you did, but they just don't start, what would you tell them?
I listened to the podcast with Don Hermansen, and basically he was creating the foundation of his company while he was working at some other company. In essence, I guess I was doing the same, because once you start making something, the journey is a lot longer than you think. It's going to take you longer to get a product right, to get the customers right, to get the revenue right. And those things are like best funded when you don't have any costs, So I think, I think that the first thing is just to kind of play along with it and figure out all these details before you go and risk it all. So yeah, that would be my advice, I think.
The cliche is that you quit and you go all in, but at the end of the day, that's the least realistic scenario, where I think the threshold of failure is very high because you are also stressed to make something work.
Yeah,
I don't know. So I think this is very realistic scenario that you took also. Okay, great. Let's get into the moment when you were in Norwegian Armed Forces training, when you realized static targets were completely wrong. I want to understand the story even more in depth, just to understand, like, how were you thinking back then about fixing this problem? The backstory.
Once you become a little bit proficient with a rifle, for example, or a pistol, or any of the other weapons you train with, particularly those two, or a sniper rifle, you go and do exercises to challenge yourself. And then I realized at some point that we were going through some obstacle course, basically, and there's poppers coming up and you shoot at them. And they're controlled by the instructor walking a few meters behind you and pressing the button. So after a little while, you understand where the targets are, because they are heavy as fuck. They don't move. So the instructor presses the button at some inopportune moment for you, but you kind of realize, you kind of know where they are. So it's more or less the same. You anticipate everything. And once you start anticipating things, you're not learning anymore. So that's when I kind of realized that in this area where we were training, even though these were coming up like that, that was the exception. Exception, that's the right word. In other places, there were only paper targets or steel targets that would fall down, but they were still absolutely static. And I realized that this was not challenging after a little while. So I just wanted to kind of get that extra challenge.
Let's get into a huge mass on December 2022 when you officially founded BlinkTroll Robotics. What pushed you from hobby to serious business?
Well, at that time I was running my web store. I was doing fairly well with that. I was pretty content with that. I had made some products. I was selling that around everywhere, and it started going into over to routine. And at the same time, I had a demand for the moving target systems that I was kind of unable to fulfill. I was getting market pull, but I couldn't really deliver, and it was a challenging situation to choose. And at the time when I made the company, I just kind of found a solution to one of my biggest problems in making the systems. And I said, now I can actually do it. So then I established a company on the belief that I was able to serve the market properly, or at least better than what I was doing, because I was not able to deliver. So that was kind of the cue that kind of said, all right, let's move into this, because this is big. There is a pull here.
Super interesting. Well, that's one of the best, how would you say that? Arguments to start a company, right? Like market just wants it. Let's just make something real out of it. Okay, great. Super. Thanks for sharing that insight. At some point during the journey, you realized this couldn't be a one-person business. Curious what was going on in your head back then, if you were thinking about finding somebody to start this with, or have you had it on a back burner until somebody comes to your life, or how were you thinking about that in the very beginning?
In the very beginning, I was getting help with some parts of the project, and that was like friends, fools, and family chipping in on basically solving some issues, electronics and programming and so on. But it was only me that was doing this like as a commitment. And then I was also traveling to customers, putting it up, showing them how to use it, giving them demos, quotes, and sending invoices, and doing all these things. It became like a massive overload of what I was actually capable of doing, as well as designing the things, ordering the bits and pieces, and putting it together. So it was quite obvious that this was like a little bit too much for one person to deal with, really. If I wanted to go somewhere, I had to kind of grow the team and basically get more people on board to take care of every aspect of an organization and a company.
And then you found a person called Øystein. So I'm curious about the very early story of how did you found each other and how did you convince him to join you build the company?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Where I had the offices in Bergen, I had ample space, so I rented out some of the office space to another company. And this guy works in robotics with drones and so on. And he said, I know this guy. I met another guy here. You should talk to him. I was like, yeah, sure. Let's like get him over for a coffee. And Øystein came by. You know, he's a tall guy. He's got curly hair. It's moving around a lot. He's got energy. And he was working on a business degree at the school in Bergen. And he was already into kind of startup things, working in the salmon industry. And he was completely switched on to kind of building companies and stuff. And he thought this project was like the coolest ever. So I didn't have to convince him. He's just like, this is so cool. We gotta get this out there, you know. And with that kind of energy, it becomes a lot easier to do something. So it was a perfect match. You know, I can do technical stuff. I can draw and design and produce, and he can do marketing, sales, and organizations. So, you know, there was no convincing. It was like a match.
So you met him and then pitched or told him about BlinkTroll, or was it your friend that introduced the company before you met him in person?
No, my friends just told him that you should talk to Kenneth because he's making something cool in defense. And Øystein came over and it's like, yeah, what are we talking about? And I said, well, I'm making this simple solution, this and that. And he said, you're doing what? That's so cool. And then it's like, okay, let's go and have a look at it. And he was like, from then on, understanding what I was doing. And so it was kind of selling itself, really.
You were quite lucky, I would say. Like sometimes it's very hard to find your match. For people that, for example, have gone through the process of seeing a gap on the market and building maybe a prototype for it, but then they realize that they want a co-founder, but they maybe didn't have as luck moment as you did. What would be your advice for them on how to get a co-founder?
That's a good question. I think that you got to find somebody who's not you, to make sure that somebody who's challenging you a little bit and bringing on some other viewpoints, somebody who can kind of fill in where you're lacking, basically. So I know that I'm not very good at sales. I kind of hate it. I like doing demos. I like being out with the customers. But if you ask me to make a sales email, I like that's not me. I like making the things. He like, oh, this is cool. I'm going to do it this way. So people are different and people are bolted together, but we kind of overlap into the military. So he's got a lot of military experience as well. But we talk well, we communicate well. So we focus on that. And then, so I suppose if you're going to go looking for somebody, that's tough for sure. But eventually, you find somebody who can kind of fill you in where you're lacking. That's really important because if there was Kenneth number two, we'd be a terrible team. We'd be fighting over the same drawings. We'd be making the same. You know, it would be terrible.
Okay, interesting. So I guess step number one, realize what you don't want to do or cannot do or hate to do, and then try to find a person that can fill up. Okay, that's a great one.
Yeah, or focus on the positive, which might be more important, really. But you got to know a little bit about your weaknesses when you go into this. And I know some of my weaknesses at least, and that's kind of the structures things of sales. I don't like that. So that's one of the things anyway.
Yeah, I'm just curious, a side question. If Øystein didn't have background in the forces, would you still get him on board?
Øystein for sure. I mean, he's a special character in this, Max. He's got energy and he's extremely willing to learn. And he's really absorbing information and teaching himself new ways. And he's really like, oh, there's a challenge. I'm going to take that challenge. So I guess he's the kind of guy who you do want on your team, no matter what, just because he's so energized. But I got other people on the team now that has similar skill sets, and don't have any military background, but they totally see the goal and they move with the energy that they have towards that. So I think it's just a massive advantage that he knows about these things and he's been there himself. But I definitely want to have him on board, even if it didn't have that background.
Super interesting. And the reason why I was asking was just to explore the notion of getting into the defense tech industry, right? Maybe not everybody has a background, but still I heard this quote from one person that I know that they want to fulfill their civic duty to get into the industry, to really put their energy into something that can protect the borders of the country that they love, right? But they might not necessarily have the background. So you think it's totally fine for people even outside of the industry to get into the industry?
Yeah, for sure. But then you got to do something else, which I kind of think we're taking care of. You gotta find a way to verify that what you're doing makes sense.
Mm.
I know from a technical perspective, weaponry and shooting and that kind of technology pretty well. So I know that there's a need for it. I
Mm.
know there's a need for quality training, for example. So if you're coming from the outside and you have a really great idea, I guess it goes for any company really, but you got to know that your market really wants this.
Mm.
So if you don't have those people inside your company, either get it or make sure you reach out to somebody who's got the skill sets or the knowledge to verify it that way.
And for people that might think, yeah, but it's easy to say, reach out to somebody, but how? Right? For people outside of the industry, it might be a bit a puzzle to reach out to the right person. What would be your approach if you were Kenneth from not in the industry? So an outsider Kenneth.
Good question. Make a YouTube video, connect with somebody on YouTube and get it out there. So eventually some soldiers who are in special forces or other places who has kind of the pull that you need or the potential pull, get them to see it. You got to get it in front of your customers. And it just means that you have a longer road to go, but you got to make yourself public or visible in some way.
Okay, I love, again, super practical. Just get it out there and do it as many times until somebody sees that, right? Super. Thank you so much for sharing. Okay, great. So we are now talking about around 2023, where you and Øystein joined the forces together. Tell me more about how the day-to-day agenda and work looked like at BlinkTroll back then.
It started out with parts, literally parts, and aluminum and bolts and motors being put together And that was all it was. There was a web page, sure, but I mean, there was no structure. There was nothing in the company that was basically facilitating growth. Because when everything has to go through one person, it's like a choke point, and that person was me. So Øystein was kind of sitting down with me, and we were talking about where we want to go, what we want to do, who our present customers were, and where we need to move. So together we were putting out little strategies. Okay, we can do this with that. With the money we have, we can do this. Let's try it out, right? So we tested out something. We got some sales. Oh, we can do something else now. That was like quietly where we were. And we were getting some results from that. Luckily, the product was more or less making its own advertisements among the users.
Nice. Mouth-to-mouth marketing. Okay, great. Did you have any failures in those tests that you mentioned?
Yeah, I'd say the product was pretty shitty to begin with. Mechanically, it was working all right, but it had so many bugs. Code was bad, communication was bad, program was bad. There was a lot of things that were going wrong to begin with. But we was like continuously putting the resources into fixing that. So there's been some iterations and fixes, but luckily our customers saw the value even in a flawed product and continued supporting it, continued calling me in the most absurd hours of the day and asking for solutions or fixes or improvement suggestions. So, I mean, that kind of was really painful because it was, people are having problems with your product, but on the other side, they were calling because they really wanted it. So that was a tough period to get it like stable and working and not piss your customers off.
Yeah. You mentioned that your customers were very proactive, telling you that something doesn't work, but they were patient. Were there any customers from your initial customer group that were pissed in a negative sense?
Some customers were going to use the product and it didn't work, and they had put all these guys together to do some exercise, and they really wanted to do it. And if it didn't make it work, or didn't make it play as it should, they were understandably a bit frustrated. Sometimes it was like user error. And then you can argue, is the product good enough if the customers are getting these user errors? Probably not. There was definitely some friction to begin with there. But again, you develop a bit of thick skin and you say, okay, thank you for the feedback. Let's get this thing working. So, I mean, I've been jumping on a plane the next day to move to a shooting range somewhere in South Europe to get it up and running. And the customer's like, okay, we really need this. We paid money for it. And it's like, it needs to work. And 5 minutes later, it's working, and they're like high-fiving you all day long because it gives them tremendous value. So, I don't know.
Thick skin is a very good description of what you did. Awesome. That's not very common. That's super important trait. Okay, I will stay on the topic of customers. So even before you founded the company, you had already a market pull. So people wanted to buy things from you without you doing anything. I would love to understand, once you created the company, once you found Øystein as your co-founder, how was your approach in getting new customers, apart from the mouth-to-mouth marketing?
Once you get like a certain clientele of customers, which for us to begin with was special forces, they do a lot of co-training across the borders. So we got the first traction just from that. And then we started trying to work ourselves into the more general market. And that was like talking to the acquisition organizations across Europe to make them look at our system and basically making ourselves a little bit more visible, because there was like zero marketing from our side at that
Okay,
point.
interesting. And how did you get special forces on board
Well,
in the first place?
It's because both of us has background from that space. I didn't really utilize it in any way because I started making these things after I left there. But they saw it and they like called me up and like, what the hell? Why are you making these things? Why didn't you tell us? So when the first special forces customer bought it to train their snipers, it soon kind of evolved into other specialties underneath in the special forces. And then somebody came from Denmark, visited Norway, and they bought it, and then somebody from Germany visited either Denmark or Sweden or Norway, and they bought it, and so it kind of went that way.
And if you didn't have this background, which is very hard to imagine, but I'm curious, just to challenge you a bit, how would you approach the sales cycle there if people didn't know you? What would you do?
There's two ways: the public way, or going into fairs, basically, like the big military fairs in Europe, in Germany, or in France, or in England or Great Britain, and just be present there and have some sort of way to display this for the guys who walk around on the floor looking for news, right? Uh, I mean, it's a long shot, but they will be there, and if you are able to catch their attention, you have a chance that way, I suppose. But yeah, it's not easy.
And how do you catch their attention? Imagine that you are in the forces or on the buying side. What would take your eye?
I think that there's something that's different that basically stands out from everything else that's out there. That is kind of important. And we're lucky in that regard because we're making a super simple system that kind of gives you something kind of advanced. And also for us, it's been a major sales point that people can use this themselves. So once you tell them that this is the tablet you use, this is the case, this is all your gear, and now you can go out and do what normally requires a train track, guys are like excited because they really want to master this. Professional soldiers are ambitious in that regard.
Okay, thanks for sharing that. Okay, let's get into the next big milestone, where you made a decision to leave your origin country, Norway, to move the company to Denmark. Walk me through that decision, and I'm very curious why you made the decision in the first place, right?
We came to Dalo Days, fall 2023. We already had pretty good contact with the Danish Defense Acquisition Organization, and much better than the Norwegian version, which kind of treated us fairly hostile. So when we came to Denmark, we had good traction with them. We had good floor attention when we were there, and then we met with people from Odense and Odense Robotics Startup Fund and Technological Institute, and they were like, "You guys have got to move to Odense, and we got a startup fund here. We really like what you're doing." And we were like, "What is this? We never encountered anything like this in Norway at all." So we went down here to kind of see for ourselves what they're talking about. So we saw a lot of hardware. We saw, Odense Robotics City. We saw companies growing here. We saw a lot of ecosystem that we didn't encounter in Norway. So that, combined with the fact that most of our customers were right across the border in Germany or Netherlands or Belgium or anywhere in Europe, basically made it really interesting for us. So, after a bit of deliberation, we said, like, this looks real, this looks promising. And it was just me and Øystein, and we said, all right, if we're going to do this, let's do this properly. And really glad we'd made the decision. Really kind of worked
Interesting.
out.
Do you think the situation in Norway is right now different, or do you think it's still the same?
I think they're getting around to it. At that time, when we talked with people in Denmark, they were like, there's a war going on right over there in Ukraine, and we are kind of part of this. We're part of Europe. In Norway, I think, like, I get the sensation that people feel that the fjords and the mountains will protect them, and forgetting that everybody lives in Oslo. I think it's Norwegians might be a bit slow on the uptake every now and then. So from my perspective, the Danes kind of got onto this a lot quicker. And I thought that was the right thing to do. And I thought Denmark was the right place to do it. So I see now and I hear from Norway that people are getting on board this defense train, so to speak. But I think they're late to the party. We're just about, it's getting really warm now. So what about if you guys had been a little bit less conservative some time ago? And, so yeah, I have divided feelings about Norway's status when it comes to the war in Ukraine. We have made immense amounts of money on gas prices and oil prices and everything like that. And it's been sitting quietly up there in the mountains and just like skimming. And I think
Is
that's,
there
yeah.
interesting perspective? Is there anything you would love to say to Norwegian FMA to make the ecosystem much better and stronger for new founders starting in Norway in this industry?
If you go in Norway and you talk about defense, people will ask you two questions, maybe three. Have you spoken with Kongsberg? Have you spoken with NAMO? Have you spoken with FFI, with Defense Research Institute? So the first two questions are like, have you spoken with the king recently? No, I haven't been granted an audience. Secondly, when you talk about FFI, they're also nice guys, but they'll put down a committee to assess whether what you're doing makes sense or not. And it's like, okay, that's cool. In Ukraine, they're building the things and they're testing them out. And they're doing things actively all the time. And they're spending everything they have to be able to do that. And they're iterating every day. They don't put down a committee. They don't wait around to see. So I think that if Norway is going to be able to do things with some speed, they have to take greater risks. They have to put down some broad terms and then just act like a VC, put something out there and maybe you'll get a return on some of it. Some of it will fail, but you don't have to assess everything down to the point where you really know if it's working or not, and then kind of put the money into it, because then it's going to take too long. You've got to fuel it early, I think.
Interesting. What would you say to new starting Norwegian founders in the industry, or people that are thinking about getting into the industry? Would you now at least recommend Norway to start in as a country?
No way. There's absolutely no way I would recommend Norway. Taxes in Norway is getting ridiculous. There is wealth tax going on, even on unrealized gains. So I think that there's lots of other places to go and start than in Norway. Denmark might be a good option. I mean, the taxes are not low here either, but the startup environment and the ecosystems, either in Copenhagen or in Fyn, is a lot better, I think. So, yeah.
I think it's super important to first identify the problems. We just did that now, and I hope that somebody from the Norwegian ecosystem is listening to change the things, so the ecosystem can really thrive here as well as it does in Denmark. And regarding Denmark, I'm very curious about the very first moments once you move the company there. What were the first moments there, apart from the culture shock that you had, that people were very open about helping out and open about being excited about what you built?
Once we were accepted into the startup hub here, the phone started ringing from local companies. This is X and Y metal shop. This is X and I supplies. This is X and I batteries. We're wondering if you have any needs that we can help you out with. And I was like, yeah, for sure, we do. Actually, we do. And there was a lot of different companies that just contacted us to see if there is a way for them to make business and on the same time help us. And that was a bit of a shock for me, because we don't do that in Norway. You don't call other businesses to ask them if they need your services. It's like you sit around and you wait for somebody to call you, so the mentality here was a bit different, and it was really enjoyable, to be honest.
What took to convince your co-founder, Øystein, to actually move from one country to another?
You don't have to convince Øystein about anything. If you make the logical conclusion that the market is in Europe, Denmark is better, he goes like, that sounds like where we need to be. So I didn't have to convince him. We kind of aligned on the goal, and then he was right next to me, discussing this and saying this makes so much sense. So yeah, I didn't have to convince him at all. He was like right there and taking charge.
Awesome. Well, that's a very good, flexible co-founder. I love it. Totally makes sense. You do the company where the customers are and where the support is, right? So next huge chapter, June 2024, Knut Ofshus joins as a CTO that has a PhD in electrical engineering from the Norwegian Defense Research Institute. How did you land at this legend?
They have a statue of Knut the King down in Odense, and we say that Knut has returned again. Odense Knut was nearing his early retirement in his early 60s from the university in Bergen, and through mutual friends, he came and had a look at some issue I had, and we got to know each other. He thought what we were doing was super cool. He's been into a big supporter of Norwegian defense, so he got some background from that as well. So he thought what we were doing was really nice and exciting, and he liked the energy, and he was of the opinion that he needed to stay focused on something difficult to kind of maintain his mental agility and, basically stay on top of things. And he wanted to do something that was fun and challenging. So he more or less invited himself. I kind of remember I called him up and said, "You want to grab a cup of coffee and, have a chat?" And then he was like, "I anticipated this. I really wanted this." So he more or less came on board with zero pay, worked for a long time without any money, and supported us in breaking some challenges and hurdles we had. Um, and it really has been a tremendous power in our organization. Again, somebody who does something that I cannot do, has got a different skill sets than I do, but has the shared vision of the direction we're going.
And you mentioned pay, and we haven't got into that yet. How did you survive in the first years of the company? Did you make all of the money from selling the product itself, or have you had any other secret sauce to survive until the point that you fundraise?
I wish, I wish. No, we had sales, we had revenue from sales. It wasn't quite enough, and we had supply problems. We couldn't deliver enough, and stuff like that. We got founder money as well for myself and Øystein, and that got us through some tough spots as well. But in principle, we were lucky enough to get revenue that would support a very slim economy. We didn't spend a lot of money, and Øystein, he is turning every coin twice before he spends it. So we were doing completely on our own funds plus the founder from Denmark here.
And by the way, for people that don't know what the founder is, can you give us a quick background here?
It's basically present your idea. Danish states will got a tremendous group, put them together a few times a year, I think, and they basically work the way that we talked about previously, that the Norwegian defense maybe should work. They look at your idea, they look at your plans, and if they think it makes sense, they'll fund you basically two salaries, or one salary per person, which in our case was two. So that is a tremendous system, and it's worked well. And the good thing about it is also that they offer you mentoring. They'll give you a mentor that will come and talk with you about your business plans, your plans to go to market, and all kinds of stuff like that you need. And really, they help you, and they put you in contact with a lot of other founders, and they give you a lot of resources. So I think it is actually a well-functioning system. It doesn't demand so much from you, and it gives you a lot of benefits. So tremendous.
And for founders outside of Denmark, by the way, there are so many similar opportunities across Europe. In Germany, there's something similar called the Exist grant. So check it out. There are so many programs that you could tap into that can give you some money to stay afloat until you get into a point where it can be sustainable. So thank you so much for sharing the perspective from the Danish ecosystem. Okay, next thing I would love get into hiring. So by this time you were yourself, Øystein, and Knut. At what point you started to hire people and why?
Well, we started getting interns. There's a lot of people out there who wants valuable experiences. They want to work with something that's meaningful. Our fourth employee is actually a Ukrainian guy who lived in Italy. He was between spaces. He was a refugee from 2014. He had knowledge about coding and programming, so we managed to get him over here on a work visa. And then we got interns. And then as we kind of grew revenue, we started picking out good people that could work for little money, and to grow the system, to grow the code, to grow the applications and so on. So long before me and Øystein started taking out any kind of money for ourselves, we just gave that to employees and interns who could work for as little money as possible.
Okay, that's great. And how were you how was your approach in selecting the people? So you knew what you need people for, but how did you choose the right ones?
If you have 10 interviews, there's maybe one person who's got spark in their eyes. And that's usually the person we'd take. Not necessarily one with the best education or the best skill sets or the best experiences, but the one with spark in their eyes. The person that you can see sort of response in their eyes, and you can see they're excited about things and what we're doing. And that has been probably the major factor in selecting anybody to coming on board.
And that's super interesting because every founder that has built a company over time into something great and sustainable has the same answer, right? It's about the
Right.
passion. It's about
Yeah.
the energy. That's all you need. If that person has it, then everybody is much happier. Everybody's more productive because the environment is so much easier to be in. And the last thing about the team, you're now leading a team of 10 individuals from 5 nationalities. I would also love to understand, how did you build such an international team as a Norwegian founder?
I just actually we're 15 and we're going to be
50.
yeah, so and we're growing. Um it's really interesting, and to be honest, I don't do that. The team does that. Øystein does that. The guys does that. People recruit all over. People in our company tell their friends. Obviously, people put in their applications as well. And the tremendous team that we have here, they are responsible for that. I sit in on as many interviews as I can, but I don't do that. All I do is facilitate the environment as much as I can together with Øystein and Knut and the others. And once they know what we're looking for, once they have this kind of goal and the spirit, then they are fully capable of picking out the people that fit in. I don't have a magic wand or a magic view to be able to discern that completely myself, but the other guys in the team are able to do that as well. So that is how it works. And a very, very diverse team. There's a lot of different people here from, uh, a lot of different places in their lives, and there's a lot of different educations and backgrounds and everything, but there's a common denominator in some regard that kind of work out pretty well.
Before you actually started the interview, you made a note, I do not give 2 single ducks about your origin if your desired destination aligns with mine. So that would be a great summary of the approach, how you're looking into this one.
Yeah, yeah. Like I think I also wrote in that summary that I'm colorblind, and I mean that in the literal sense. If you put me in front of a red and green stop sign in the traffic, I remember which is which, and sometimes I even see it vaguely. But I teach myself things in a different way, I suppose. So I think it's really important to be colorblind in that regard, and be
Mm.
able to kind of see the other things.
It's a very good analogy. Okay, great. Let's talk about money. So, a few days ago, when we published this episode, you raised officially 1.5 million euros in a pre-seed round from us, Fund Frontier, and the Norwegian Family Office. Tell me the full funding story from the very start to finish.
When we started out having the first probing talks with an angel investor, in Norway, we had a great learning experience. We had a pitch. Basically, he knew our company a little bit. We had a pitch, and he wanted 34% of the company for something roughly around 200,000 euros. And he gave us a scolding for not having a perfect pitch and not for having not included all the things we needed in the pitch. And we thought, this is a bit off. And he basically would have killed the company if he had gotten his investment. He would have lost his money. We would have lost the will to continue at some point. And since that, we took a little breather and we kind of approached it a little bit differently. We waited it out. We went deeper into the market. We got more traction. We got more verification. And when we started looking into financing again, which was probably starting around November, December last year, we had more knowledge. We had gained a lot of knowledge from the ecosystem here. We've spoken with lots of founders, and we went out and we talked to probably around 40 different investors, I think. Some of them were like grouped together, and some of them were single angels. Some of them were family offices. Some of them were VCs. And we got into every kind of situation that's possible to get into. We got into people who really wanted to invest in us, but we were into defense, and their policies didn't really allow it. And we talked to people who wanted too much. We talked to people who kind of highly valued their own contribution, while we kind of figured we only need your money, really. So there was all kinds of things there, and we went pretty far with a lot of these people before we realized that we were not getting the optimal deal. And what is the optimal deal? Well, it's for us, we have a pretty good organization. We value good advice, but at the end of the day, we're the specialists here. We're the specialists on our market. So what we wanted was an alignment between the investors and ourselves, and somebody we can talk well with, communicate well with, somebody who realizes or understands the market to a certain degree and is willing to kind of come along the journey for a while. And we met that with Niels and you guys, and we met that with the Norwegian family office. They had strong opinions about being into defense as well. They wanted to be into this space. And so we aligned on several key metrics for us, values. Yeah. So it's been a long journey. I kind of don't want to go into too much details about the ones we turned down, but we were in the lucky position that we were actually able to turn down and say no thank you to a lot of people.
I just want to do a very small retrospective. If you went back in time, before you started to fundraise, what would be the one thing that you would tell to your younger self to either avoid or do more of it during the fundraising?
We do this because of values. We do this because we believe in it. As much as we want to make money, we want to make something that has a valuable contribution. So I think me and Øystein, we're pretty good at talking with the investors and really vetting them and figuring out, do you share my values? And to begin with, maybe we didn't do that enough, because at the end of the day, when I have to decide if somebody gets a chunk of the company in exchange for some money, I need to make sure that they're aligned with what we're doing, and that is not non-negotiable. So I think we wasted a little bit of time in the beginning with some people who were like, yeah, this is cool, we're going to make some money out of this. And that's not cutting it. I mean, that's not enough. So, but I mean, everybody's going to have their own journey in this regard. You have to do deep work. You have to do the budgets. You have to do the market analysis. You have to do the numbers, and you have to do all that hard work. And I think once you put your numbers and your Excel sheets out there, you send it to an investor, you get some feedback, and you learn. I can't tell you that. Nobody can tell you that. You have to do the work yourself. So, I mean, getting funded and fundraising is a job in itself. And I'm lucky to have a co-founder who could do the most of that, because I would have killed myself slowly if I was supposed to do those Excel sheets. But you just gotta do the work and get somebody who aligns with your purpose.
And I would love to get into one point that some listeners might question here. So you had one product in your product line. Why to raise funding in comparison with just growing by reinvesting your profits from sales?
It's kind of slow, and we wanted to do this faster. That's one concern. We wanted to get more people on board to expand the company's capabilities. We want to make sure that we are not only making one product, we're making many products that work together. So we are aiming not just to produce or provide one solution. We're aiming to provide a whole suite of solutions that together will change the way people train. And in order to do that, to avoid that I sit and draw 5 different solutions or machines or whatever, I can get somebody on board to help me out with that, and somebody to help me out with making the communication systems, and plus somebody to help me out with sales and logistics and so on. That is the reason why I guess anybody who's got a viable product would get investments, is just to make it happen quicker.
One more thing I want to get into. So you mentioned that you are expanding the base of products. I would love to understand, how do you think about deciding what product to work on next if you are adding more products into your portfolio? Do you think about the mission that you set of a company, or is there any other process going?
This is trade secret. In any small company, small company, I think from my perspective, the best answer to that question is, what's the shortest way to the money? So basically, how can I get money from the customers? Basically, is there a market desire for this? And if A and B says the market wants A and B is going to take 1 year and A is going to take 2 months. B is going to get 1 million, the other one's going to get 10,000. Go for the one that gets you the money quickest. And that's like been my mantra. The simplest solution that gets you revenue as fast as possible.
And then once you get more revenue, then you already have more hires, and then the snowball effect comes, and then you can build whatever you want, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you can sit down and you can strategize and you can think about things, but without money, you're not getting anything done. So now when we're funded, we can look into, okay, this is our plan. This is our umbrella. These things live underneath here. This one is a key player to kind of unleash something else or to release something else. All right, so let's focus there. So that kind of connects everything. That would now be possible, but it wasn't possible before because it will take too long and would expend out our money. So rather than overcomplicating things, you just make the simplest possible thing you can and sell it.
I very love how practical we went here in last hour. Okay, awesome. And now I would love to learn about the future of the company. Where are you going in the short and long term?
When I was a kid, you could read Rocketeer, and you'd basically get the idea that in the future everybody would have a flying car or their own jetpacks and shit. And I'm a little bit disappointed. There's not too much about that coming along. I think in terms of training systems, there is so much technology out there that we could utilize, first and foremost to improve the skills of our soldiers and police officers. Because right now, I think everybody is going out on a shooting range is just making fucking loud noises and bang, 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 and everybody's satisfied. Something looked like it's happening on the other side, and then we go home with a confidence that is not based on solid foundation. So in this regard, what I want to do is that when you enter a shooting range, when you raise your rifle, our system knows where you point that rifle. When you fire your bullet, we'll know if you hit or not. We'll know where you missed or where you hit. And when you do something, the shooting range engages with you so that your actions are met with responses. So this can be autonomously driven, or it can be made by a program. If you make a program and you put your soldiers through it, you can measure them from day 1 to day 5. And you'll see if they made some progress. Once they get accustomed to this kind of scenario, you flip a switch or you change the program and everything's changing, and they're still presented with challenges. And today, I think that's lacking. And I want to connect all these pieces together. So whatever kind of training, shooting training you're doing, you're engaging with something that's realistic. And I think it's really, really important because there's not a single soldier out there who is not carrying a weapon in some regard. And you can talk about drones and artillery all you want, but if you don't give people the skill sets, the basic skill sets, it's really bad for them. So that is the core foundation. We're going to have to train millions of soldiers if we're going to continue down this course, and nothing looks like it's stopping right now. And we're going to utilize the technology and the skill sets we develop from that to engage in other areas as well when the time is right for that. And we'll definitely be making more products into this fair.
Okay, awesome. To look even more into the future, what do you think? Which is more likely, that BlinkTroll becomes a unicorn or gets acquired by a major defense contract?
Good question. I think we're going to be a unicorn before defense contractors figure out what we're doing. They're working in a different space than we are, a mental space at least.
Thank you so much for covering the journey. It was super, super, super interesting. Is there any last thing before we get into the fire round questions that you would love to share with the community of founders that are starting in the defense tech industry or people that want to get into the industry itself?
Whatever you do, like at least from my perspective, you gotta have some fire for what you're doing. You gotta have some passion for it. So if you have enough passion for what you want to do, by all means, go ahead and do it. And the defense is kind of difficult to get into because, like, who are your customers? They don't have a phone number. It's hard to send them an email. It's hard to kind of knock on their door. So it is a difficult space to go into, but I mean, the reward is in itself, being able to do something meaningful. So, but I mean, get around, talk to people, and luckily, small companies are happy to share their experiences. But you gotta be willing to go the extra mile, so to speak. You gotta have some fire for what you're doing.
It's a good call. Talk with people, be proactive, make it simple. I think the whole episode made everything so simple. So I hope somebody will take an inspiration from it. Okay, great. Thank you so much for sharing that insight as well. Now let's get into the very, very last part of the episode, which are fire round questions. I have some questions on you here prepared, and I'm very curious what's your take on them. First one, what's your most controversial opinion about the European defense industry?
I think a lot of it is down to politicians getting their voters' approval. So everybody wants to build a new frigate because it's big money, it's big industry, there's a lot of supplies going on. So Norway is going to be building new ships. I think Denmark is building new ships. And everywhere you'll read in the newspaper that this city can build it, or that city can build it, or this nation can build it. For sure, it's got to be Danish, or for sure, it's got to be Norwegian. And I think that's ludicrous. I think that I know more about submarines than I know about frigates, but the last time Norway bought frigates, they bought it from the cheapest bidder in Spain. It wasn't a good call. If you're going to buy submarines in Europe, you buy them from Germany because Germany knows how to build submarines. I mean, I'll die on that hill. But so now, if you're going to buy something as antiquated as frigates, sorry guys, why not buy it from the guys who's got the best track record? That's the only measurement.
Makes sense, right?
The only measurement. So we're putting our kids, our boys and daughters and uncles or brothers and fathers on those ships, and they're going to be warships. And the only metric that matters in that regard is how good that ship is to fulfill its mission and to make sure the guys and girls on board that ship survives. Any other question is fucking irrelevant. So sorry for swearing, but I think that this is wrong. On the approach that we have in Denmark, in Norway, and everywhere else. Just like, it's very basic stuff, but we do it again and again, and we choose things that are not optimized.
Yeah, history repeats itself in one way or another, right? Okay, very good reflection. Okay, next one. Now let's get into the topic of startups. What is the biggest misconception people have about defense tech startups?
I guess from the outside, people will think that there's some kind of a secret sauce that once you're into defense, that you automatically connected to some sort of a golden house with gold coins coming out. It's not really like that, it's still a lot of hard work. The reward might be higher at some point if you get a good contract, for example. But I think the sales are fewer and it's harder work to get to those sales. So, I mean, it's not a golden path for sure.
I think because of the popularity of the industry nowadays, everybody talks about it. People have put pink glasses on themselves too many times, I think. Okay, great. Next one. For early stage defense tech founders listening, what would be your advice on navigated military procurement in the beginning?
There is nobody with power or influence in the military procurement programs that will buy anything based on their own wishes or desires. They simply act upon what is being requested from them. So basically, you have to find somebody who's willing to ask for your products or your solutions, and then they will create internal requests for your systems. So you got to get out there and get somebody who will be interested enough in your products or your solutions in such a way that they will create the pull in the organization.
Right. Again, simple, understandable. Okay, we'll stay on the procurement. You have sold to Norwegian, Danish, German, Belgian, and more forces. How different are the procurement processes?
First sales I did to Norwegian unit, I got a call from the Norwegian Defense Procurement Agency basically saying that I had broken the procurement rules. I said, sorry, what? And they said, you have to do this and that. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm just providing the equipment. And if you guys can kind of help me out. And apparently I'd broken some rules. Very hard to understand. It's a bit like Kafka, actually. And then I sold some systems to some Danish to a Danish group, and I got a call from FMI, and they said, "Hello, we hear that you have sold some systems to this unit." And I said, "Yes, that's right." And they said, "Okay, that's nice. Can we help you with getting a NATO stock number?" And I said, "That's very nice of you. Thank you very much." So totally different approach. But the Germans, they like documentation, they like timelines, they like long decision processes. They'll get there eventually, but they like their German style of things. So, I mean, that's a good reason for working with companies in each country that knows how this is done. So if you're working in defense in Germany, you probably want to have a German partner. You can probably deal with Dutch and Belgian armies or police on your own. But Germany, you probably want to have a partner. And it kind of depends a little bit on each nation. So different animals, really.
It's all about the culture, right? And every industry is different in every country, right? And Europe is, even though maybe small in geography in comparison with China, for example, right? Still, like, everybody has a different way of doing things. So that's super smart to go either where you are based or to people that already went through it and can tell you how to approach those guys. One more question. So in retrospective, what would 2022 Kenneth think if he could see BlinkTroll today?
That's a good question. I've been reflecting on similar things, and balancing out where we are and where we were. And to be honest, I am a little bit baffled by how far we've come. I'm still not quite sure how, but the only thing that I know that is concrete is that we kind of put out some really hefty goals, and we put all our energy into it. So if I was to look back and look at now, I'd basically be like, wow, that's far. That's really far. So I'm really, really pleased with that. But again, it's not my effort. It's the whole team.
Always that team. Yeah, awesome. And a bonus question: do you think Europe can compete with the American or US defense tech innovation?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's an ample amount of smart people in Europe. I think there's capital. I think there's industry and skill. And I think that the Americans have completely forgotten the fact that they don't have the same industry that they had in the 1940s anymore. And their advantage in the Second World War was really mass and volume. And I don't think they have that anymore. And I think that their manufacturing base is not what it was. So I don't think that they have like this massive comparative advantage anymore that we couldn't compare with. So I think that there is no reason to not be able to compete with them.
Thank you so much for answering the questions. It was super interesting. Any last thoughts, very last thoughts you would love to share with the listeners here before we wrap up?
Well, I think you asked me previously when we chatted about like who would need our system, and I always think like who wouldn't need it or who wouldn't need proper training. And I kind of I kind of say to myself, would I put my own kids into military service? And the question might be no, because I wouldn't trust the training well enough. And that's like a non-answer, right? I can't really say that and be like who I am and a citizen and wanting to protect what we have. So I'm trying to contribute to fixing that in providing the society and our soldiers and my kids the training that they would need to be soldiers if they were. And at some point, like, again, who can you choose among those boys out there? Who will you prioritize training? Your son, his son, my son, somebody else's? Why don't we make sure that we prioritize humans first and make sure that even in the talk of all these big ships and tanks and airplanes, we forget all the people. And I think that the people are what we should prioritize first. And that is my core belief. So that is what we aim for every day. Make sure that you believe and know that you've provided everybody with as much training and equipment as you can. And when you have done that, you can rest.
It's a great reflection for the end of the episode. So thank you so much for joining. It has been a journey. Thank you so much for sharing the insights.
Thank you very much for having me, Martin.